What's up, guys? So this is Ray. Today's the 17th of June, 2017. It is Saturn Day, and today's the official day that Neptune goes retrograde. So the exact time that it went retrograde would be June 17th, 2017, Saturn Day, Saturday, at 4:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So obviously the west coast of the United States is where I'm at. And the hour, the ruling lord of the hour, when it went retrograde, was Mars. So Neptune is currently in the 11th house as it goes retrograde, and it has co-dwellers with the moon and Chiron. So the moon has to do with your emotional complex, and Chiron obviously with your weaknesses on a mundane level. It has to do with the attitude or mentality, or the feeling towards, the feeling like collectively, cohesively. And then Chiron has to do with any weaknesses within the institutions, any like weak chains, or something directly to do with some sort of debilitation. Then if we look to the house that Neptune rules, which is the 12th, the planets that are dwelling in that at this moment, when it goes retrograde, are still a crucial, important key with this in dissecting the general themes that will transpire while this retrograde transit is going on. So we have Venus in Taurus, Uranus in Aries, Pallas in Aries, and Eris in Aries. Okay, so the 12th house has to do with self-undoing, elusiveness, secrets that are kept from the self. So anything that would be associated with others, either individually or group or collectively or spiritually, or just things that are elusive or unknown to the self, would be attributed to the 12th house. Has to do with spirituality as well. Has to do with conspiracies and imprisonment and a lot of wounded healer, martyr sort of things. The fact that Eris is in this house, as well as we have Pallas and Uranus, those are planet signatures that can be attributed to martyrs or sacrificial kind of, symbolism with people or collective groups. So then we look at some of the major aspects that are going on at the moment it went retrograde. So Neptune will be benefiting Venus and Taurus, or will be essentially lifting the veil with Venus associations and Juno as well. So that's good and bad, and I'll get to that. So just to make sure that I wrap everything up, if you're just curious about when this starts and when it ends, it will go direct on November 23rd, 2017 on a Thursday. So that would be Jupiter's Day, Thor's Day, or Neptune's Day, if you attribute the modern associations with the Lords of the Day. And then it'll be at 7:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and the Lord of the Hour will be the Moon. And Neptune at that moment will be in the 3rd house, and it'll have a co-dweller of the South Node in Aquarius. And that would re-emphasize on that whatever transpires during this Neptune retrograde phase, even the beneficial things that come out of it, collectively, at least like on a communication line in like neighborhoods, immediate areas, are going to divert right back to their old traumatic, destructive ways, or the things that were essentially brought out into the open, or any of the secrets or conspiracies or unjustifiable kind of strategic malicious intent that was inflicted on anybody that would be associated with Juno in Capricorn and Venus in Taurus, are going to be ill-forgotten and or swept under the rug, likely from the cognitive dissonance that has been a continuing issue since we had Jupiter in Virgo opposition with Neptune in Pisces. And so again, that's going to be a continuing issue, not just because of Uranus squaring Pluto, which has to do with abnormalities to the psyche, and then Jupiter getting involved with that, which would intensify that and then make that kind of abnormality spread collectively or globally. But we also are still in the mutable years, which definitely challenges people's minds and definitely causes personality conflicts, cognitive dissonance, if anything, to the extent on extremes with neurosis and people having actual mental breakdowns, or seeming like they have full-on set psychotic sort of personality issues. So, trying to think where I should go with this. There's a couple different ways I can go with this. I was kind of looking at this and then getting overwhelmed with like just looking at the symbolism of this. So let me just make sure I brush over the basics before I get way over my head, because that's what I'm trying to do. So when Neptune goes retrograde, since it has to do with subconscious, spirituality, any of your self-undoing, self-sabotage, secrets, it has to do with terminal illness, any kind of repercussions of your daily habits or choices, and it has to do with just things that are elusive or unknown to you. So when Neptune goes retrograde, essentially everything that is associated with Neptune is flipped on its head. So it's important to not only, you can take the mundane kind of you can take the mundane concepts into account with the context, but if you want a more personalized thing, it's important for you to reference your own chart, understand what house Neptune is in for you, what are the major aspects, especially any key chart ruling points in your chart, and also what sign it's in will give you an indicator as well. For example, with me, I have Neptune in the 8th house, so that would have to do with, and it's square my sun, so a lot of the fog that I've had about who I am will be lifted, or I'll have reflection with that. With Pluto being transit over that Neptune right there, it would have to do with something that I'm having some sort of psychological clarity, and because I have it in Capricorn, that's supposed to give me some sort of practicality, but it being retrograde would actually debilitate that and make Neptune pretty much engage or interact with my chart the way it would if it were Neptune in Pisces, or like a normal Neptune. Because Neptune being in Capricorn, Capricorn's associated with Saturn, that would be holding back Neptune. So that would be the extent of, like, instead of the floodgates being open, actually putting the dam up, sort of thing. So it's going to be, anything associated with me, with Neptune, is going to be uncontainable and overwhelming, if it hasn't already. But yeah, so it's always important for you to reference your own chart if you want a more personalized experience. So when I'm looking at, let's see. I'm going to make sure I got this. Go back. Yes. Okay. So we're looking at this here. I'm just looking at kind of a mundane perspective. So Neptune being in the 11th house means that essentially the 11th house has to do again with organizations. It would be like the mainstream media, things that you're being told on social media, fake news, that sort of thing. With Neptune being retrograde now in that 11th house, either the news organizations are going to get caught, people are all going to collectively stand up and say, we can tell you're full of shit, and or there's going to be so much, like, counter-narrative evidence to demonstrate that whatever the organizations or social groups that are controlling things are full of shit, that everyone collectively, that's with the moon right there also in the 11th house, are going to feel betrayed and traumatized, because they're going to have the veil lifted about the illusions and the disillusionment that the organizations themselves and the sociological institutions have been causing. And it's going to definitely reveal some wounding things. So people are either going to go through the realization that, I can't believe I've been lied to, and they're going to accept it, and they're going to become a part of the solution against the establishment, intentionally trying to deceive people, and or they're going to continue to slip into some sort of mental dysphoria and totally lose the rest of their freaking marbles that they still have, that they're clinging on to. I have a feeling, just because of Neptune ending up in the 3rd house, which is one of the mercurial houses, in the same house with the South Node retrograde in Aquarius, that more collectively is going to continue to be controlled by the Pluto Uranus square, with the mind control and the manipulation, and they're going to just have a personality conflict and go into dysphoria and have psychotic episodes, more or less, freaking out about the people who are actually pointing out what's really going on, which has been a continuing thing, but this is going to be more of an intense, an intense dialogue about it, instead of it just being a gradual thing. So with Venus, Uranus, Pallas, and Eris in the 12th house, the 12th house can also be associated with incarceration and persecution, and conspiracies or conspiring against them. So conspiring against the establishment, which would essentially be Venus and Taurus, because Taurus in the 2nd house has to do with resources, collectively. It can have to do with sabotaging individuals' resources. And since Uranus, Pallas, and Eris are right there, Eris is the martyrs, or the people who essentially are the Pallas, standing up for justice, standing up for what's right, and the ones that are trying to do the right thing and defy the institution. So if we're looking at this from a synchronistic perspective, looking at the United States history, the founding fathers that stood up against, the British monarch, those individuals would be represented by the Eris, Pallas, and Uranus in this 12th house association here. So it's going to be how, when the British Army would come through and started pillaging some of the colonies that were the colonial villages that were helping the rebels or whatever, the founding fathers, they came in and pillaged their homes and burnt their homes down or destroyed things or whatever, tried to basically completely demoralize them and debilitate them by destroying everything that they have, their resources. That's exactly how this will translate. And I'm instantly having this this overwhelming, kind of a, wow, this necklace just does not want to stay on, does it? I'm having this overwhelming, visual in my head about that apartment dwelling tower in London somehow being directly attributed to this. Dude, I don't know what it is. This little rock here wants to come off so bad. I've replaced the glass multiple times. I find it interesting because this is a citron quartz, so this is supposed to be associated with the lithia, and it's supposed to be associated with fire, which is purifying. And it's not, this giant one doesn't want to come off, but this one, I've replaced the clip multiple times and it just really wants to come off, which is funny. Anyway, so like I said, the Eris and Pallas and Uranus in the 12th house could be attributed to either their acts to do the right thing, which there's a grand trine with Pallas to Saturn and to the North Node. So essentially that could go to a couple of different ways. I was instantly being kind of pessimistic, as per usual, and assuming that since, the South Node in Aquarius would be in the same house as Neptune when it goes direct, that there would likely be some sort of retribution, unjustified retaliation or oppression from the organizations or the Pluto and Capricorn, associations or whatever, basically the powers that be, harping down on the people that speak out. But since I just noticed this grand trine here, and the Saturn is in the 7th house, and the North Node's in the 4th house, that would be an emphasis on the karmatic intent of others standing up will be a foundation for the future. Yep. Okay, so I took a little mental time out for a second. Obviously, I'm not entirely sure exactly what transit, and I'm not going to get into that. It's making me feel a little deluded. But anyway, so I just kind of looped my video, listened to it a couple times, and was being lazy, and just kind of glanced back at the chart yet again, and some things that I felt like maybe I didn't emphasize. So there's no direct aspect at this moment when it goes retrograde, but just something to keep in mind, especially since I'm really fixated on, you know, psychological health and mental health and health in general, and the associations with symptoms with the descendant line. We have, yep, it's Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius, 13 degrees, directly on the descendant line at this moment here. And it's sextile with Jupiter, which, yeah, there's not a direct opposition between Uranus and Jupiter anymore. But again, just as I've said before with other generational aspects, the Jupiter-Uranus-Pluto T-square will still have residual effects going on definitely throughout this year, if not longer. So that has to do with a lot of mental instability. I've mentioned before too that when Black Moon Lilith went into Sagittarius and it was squaring the nodes, and the nodes had those lunar and solar eclipses line up with them during these squares, that it's actually going to be the manipulation or the intended deception caused by information being distributed through Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius, since Sagittarius has to do with information and knowledge. So it's the split of actually intentionally trying to, you know, cause a compulsive cognitive dissonance with the collective. So that the collective is associated with Neptune as well. And so looking at this from a trauma signature kind of aspect, instead of Neptune being an actual person, place, or thing, looking at it from it being what it is normally on a mundane level, collectively. So the collective people or consciousness being directly traumatized, specifically being torn between a couple of different facets that are associated with death. Their internal, gut instincts, what they're being told on a sociological level, and then what they feel the right thing to do. And that's the kind of torn thing that people would be experiencing. So with Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius on the descendant, I've attributed that to having to do with people acting out in psychotic ways, actually even committing malicious intent, traumatizing people, abusing people, murdering people, the lone wolf acts, that sort of thing as well. So that will be a continuation, and any of those malicious acts on the public actually will be elusive to who did it, because that's Neptune in the 11th house as well. I'm just going to wrap this up with that. I just want to make sure that I kind of at least ended it so it didn't seem like really unended. I know that that's a great metaphor for Neptune, but I don't need to be that literal with this one. But yeah, so I guess if you have any further questions, feel free to ask. If you want more of a direct, personalized interpretation and stuff, you're more than welcome to inquire about a personalized reading with me. And also, if you're interested in a personal transit chart report, so like just the actual major transits with your own chart to what's going to be going on between June to November with this, especially if Neptune is a chart ruler or a significant signature in your chart, might be something beneficial for you to look at, or at least to review. I do generate those or have those charts available on PDFs. If you want them actually printed out, I can do that too, but PDFs, just $60 if you're interested in that. So that's it for that, and I'm gonna upload this now and stop stalling, and yeah, so I'm not even gonna, I'm just gonna go. Adios.